Good morning, everybody. It is 10 a.m., so I think we're going to kick off. So you are all very welcome to our Ask the Experts live Q&A. So you are most likely aware that this is a Dublin Climate Action Week event. And at Kodima, we are delighted to be one of the organising partners for this week, alongside the 4 Dublin local authorities and the Dublin Climate Action Regional Office. And we are doing this event with support of the Tomorrow project funded by the EU Horizon 2020 programme. So before we kick off, just a few housekeeping pieces, which I'm sure you're all very aware of at this point if you've been attending other events this week. So this event is being recorded and we will circulate it in due course. If you are tweeting about this event, if you could please use the hashtag DCAW21. Then in terms of where to ask questions, now this is quite important given that this is a live Q&A. So if you can please use the Q&A box at the very bottom of your screen to post any questions that you have. There are over 150 people registered for this event, so we'll do our very best to answer as many questions as we can. I would request that you only post questions in the Q&A box because our team will be trying to keep track of everything that you're asking, and this can be quite difficult if there are kind of comments and conversations happening in that function. And we also just don't want to miss out on any of your questions coming through. So to kick off, I should probably introduce myself. My name is Katie Harrington. I'm the Energy and Climate Awareness Officer with Codema. So who are Kodima? We are Dublin's energy agency. We are a not-for-profit public good company limited by guarantee, and we work on behalf of the 4 Dublin local authorities. So really our mission is to accelerate Dublin's low carbon transition through innovative local level energy and climate change research, planning, engagement and project delivery. And really in order to mitigate the effects of climate change and improve the lives of citizens. So where I come in is very much in relation to energy awareness and engagement, which is why I'm particularly excited about this conversation this morning. So personally, I've been looking forward to this chat all week. I think it's a great opportunity to ask any burning questions that you might have about home energy upgrades, because really it is a minefield of information, let's be honest, and it can be very overwhelming, but our panel are here to help. And we're delighted to have you all join us on your Saturday morning. So I hope you all have a cup of tea or coffee in hand. I personally have a lemon and ginger and honey situation going on here. So I'd like to welcome our panel. We have Ruth Buggie from SEAI, Eric Dennis from KSN Energy, and Noel Rowland from Churchfield Home Services. So you're all very welcome, guys. So I might ask you all to just individually introduce yourselves briefly. So Ruth, I might come to you first.
Thanks very much, Katie. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Ruth Buggie, as Katie has said. I work in the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, and we're Ireland's National Sustainable Energy Authority. And most of you know us, if you know us at all, is because of the grants that we give out. So delighted to be here and really hope we can help this morning. I manage our Sustainable Energy Communities programme. In addition to events like this, if you're interested in doing more, you can check out our map and see if there's a community near you. There's nearly 600 around the country. And hopefully we all get enough of that out of this morning. So really looking forward to it.
Brilliant. And Eric?
Thanks, Katie. So my name is Eric Dennis. I work as a program manager for a company called KSN Energy. We're energy consultants. We do kind of work on domestic and non-domestic projects. Our main activity is on SEAI grant programs where we carry out surveys, inspections and building energy ratings. My role there primarily focuses on domestic upgrades, which includes energy upgrades to homes built before 2006 for insulation and heating controls, and before 2011 for heat pumps and solar. I'm also lucky enough to be working with the Sustainable Energy Communities programme and the county mentor for the Fingal local authority area on that programme.
Great stuff. Yes, you wear a lot of hats, Eric. I do remember this. And Noel?
Hello everyone, it's lovely to be here, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I'm Managing Director of Churchfield Home Services. So we're a company that specialises in upgrading energy efficiency in homes, and we carry out a full range of insulation measures, heating measures, renewable, across a broad range of SEAI funded programmes. We would operate in this sector for about 12 years. We've upgraded over 5,000 homes. My own background is engineering. So hopefully I'll be able to answer any of those technical questions that maybe Eric will support each other on this one. So hoping that we'll get a lot out of this today.
Brilliant. No, I definitely feel like we're in good hands this morning, guys. Thank you so much. So I suppose what's great about this event is it is totally led by all of you, our participants. So the entire chat has been shaped based on questions that we've received from everyone signing up, and also previous questions and FAQs that our experts receive on a regular basis, which is where I'm going to start. So a couple of weeks ago, I asked our three panelists, give me one question that you get asked all of the time. And Ruth and Noel, both of you kind of responded with a very similar question that you get asked regularly, which is essentially, I'm looking to make my home more energy efficient and comfortable. Where do I start? Dun, dun, dun. So Ruth, I might come to you. What would be your what would be your answer to something like that?
Sure. So whilst we're talking about the energy in the home today, we're also talking about the energy the household uses. So the first step that for most people would be encouraged to do is to understand how much energy you're using and where. So there's a nice little tracker just we have on our website where you can look at how much energy you're using on heating, how much you're using on electricity, and how much you might be using on transport. And it's understanding where that energy is being used and is there opportunities to reduce it or to make alternative choices. So the average home in Ireland spends about €2,000 on its heating and electricity costs. There might be many reasons why you're not average in your own home, but that's a guide. So if you're spending €4,000, there's an awful lot of opportunities to reduce. And if you're only spending €1,000, well, then maybe other areas in your life are a better place to make climate changes yourself. So track first, understand it, and then see what your choices really are.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And another thing as well that we have is our home energy saving kits, and they can be a great way to get kind of an understanding of where your kind of current home's energy use is at. And Noel, what would be your response to that question of where to start?
Yeah, I suppose when I'm asked that question, it's really in the context of the home, and people that are interested in upgrading their home. Generally, they're talking to a lot of contractors. They can get a lot of different information, and sometimes it's difficult to know quite where's the best place. And really, my answer in most cases is know your starting point. So get a technical assessor to carry out a technical assessment. Perhaps look at your home might already have a BR assessment done. So it's very similar to Ruth. Know your starting point. So know where you're starting from. Set yourself a goal in terms of where you want to go, and definitely the technical assessment or technical assessor can see what your current energy efficiency is, set out a program of measures in the right order that need to be completed to achieve your target goal, and that gives you a plan then. And from there, then look at, talk to contractors, where you can go onto the SEAI website to get a full list. But it's also really good to see who's working in your area. Maybe you might have a recommendation, and go talk to contractors then when you have a plan. But certainly that's what I would say is get a technical assessment, know your starting point, and set yourself a plan.
Yeah, I think that's great. Know your starting point. That's a really good takeaway. And Eric, you had a little bit more of a specific question that you get asked all the time, which is, should I install a heat pump? And now, admittedly, up until a few months ago, I didn't know what a heat pump was, okay? But I feel like that, given that our government has a target of installing 400,000 heat pumps into existing homes by 2030, I think it's a pretty important thing to know. So in the case that there are people who are kind of unsure about this type of technology, could you kind of firstly explain what is a heat pump, and then why it's important, and just kind of talk us through that, and then maybe touch on when people should consider installing one?
Sure. So firstly, I suppose to explain technology, heat pump is essentially a heating system. It works through refrigeration cycles, and it will collect energy from outside, convert it into heat, and deliver it into your home. So very similar to a refrigerator or your fridge in your house, where the technology actually will extract heat from inside the fridge, and if you ever put your hand behind it, you'll feel the heat being pumped out the back. So that's essentially the technology. Why is it important? There's probably two There's probably two elements to heat pumps that are really important. First one is its efficiency. With traditional heating systems like oil and gas, they can never really even be 100% efficient. So you're talking, generally over 90% is as good as it's going to get, maybe 92-3% efficient. Where you have a heat pump, you actually get out more energy than you put into them. And this is kind of multiplied by generally about 3 or 4 times for kind of, the stuff that's on the market at the minute. So essentially for every one, for every 1 kilowatt that goes in, 3 or 4 will come out. And you could just say the same in terms of, money. If I went to, if every time I went to get 20 euros out of an ATM, I got 80 or 60 or 80, I'd be very happy kind of with that exchange. So that's essentially where heat pumps, are very different. The other aspect to it is that they're run on electricity. And, being extremely efficient already, the fact that they're run on electricity, currently, I think the targets for renewable energy in Ireland were about 16% for 2020. And for 2030, that's going to be up to about 70%. So if you install a heat pump, you're going to get a very efficient heating appliance. And by doing nothing between now and 2030, the energy that's used to power that appliance is going to be, by 2030, should be 70% from renewables. So really your carbon footprint will continue to shrink between now and 2030, as long as renewables get added onto the grid. Yeah. So that's really the benefits to it. They're twofold. When should you put one in? I suppose the answer to the question is generally yes. There's very few cases where people would say, should I install a heat pump? And you'd say no. Definitely install them. And when is a good time to install it? It's probably different for every house. I'd say, if your boiler is coming up on 10, 15 years old, you might want to start thinking about getting ready. What Noel mentioned there about kind of knowing what you need to do is really important, because I suppose if you wait until your boiler just claps out, it's not going to, that's probably not the right time to start thinking about putting your heat pump in. Get on it early, see what you need to do to get your house heat pump ready. And then, in a couple of years' time, when your boiler does need to be changed, then you'll be ready to install it.
And I think, in terms of that statement, getting your home heat pump ready, could you kind of talk to that a little bit more? Even Noel, if you want to come in there as well. What does that mean? Sorry, Noel, you're actually muted there if you want to unmute.
Yeah, so in terms of getting your home heat pump ready, there's a number of factors you need to take into consideration. So firstly, like a heat pump is really, really efficient. And like that, the analogy of using kind of a fridge where it's actually taking a warm air or energy out of the air outside and compressing it and bringing it into the home, that's really good. But it also works in the same way as a heat pump is designed to run continuously. So it runs like a fridge, and it runs really efficiently. But if you go away for the weekend and you leave the fridge door open, and you have a lot of your warm air coming in, it won't run that efficiently. So what's really important is making sure your home is heat pump ready, which makes sure that your overall fabric is of a good upgrade. So what you're looking for is your HLI factor. So a technical assessor or BR assessor will complete a survey of your home. They'll look at all your fabric. So your floors, your walls, your windows, your roof, and they'll combine all of the U values on that to create to confirm what the heat loss factor is. And for a heat pump to be suitable, it should be below 2. So what the technical assessor might say is, okay, like what Eric said, is you don't want to be thinking about a heat pump when your boiler, blows up. You want to be thinking about it, before then, because the technical assessor might say, okay, you have a heat loss factor, maybe 2.3. We'd recommend that you would insulate your attic. When it comes to changing your windows, maybe change your windows and do your wall insulation. And when you're doing those, when it comes up to do those, you'll do those to a standard so that when your boiler comes into life and it comes to changing it, your home is heat pump ready.
Okay, yeah, no, that's really helpful. So let's say, for example, my home is heat pump ready and I've got a heat loss indicator, which I learned a few months ago as well, HLI acronyms. So say I'm ready to go. cost of a heat pump? So I know that this does range, but could you give us an indication?
Yeah, so you're talking for a heat pump unit itself between 10 and 12,000 euro. So they are, it is a significant investment, but there are significant grants through SEAI, but there are also significant energy credit incentives through various utilities. So like Electric Ireland, Energia, and all of them generally have. So not to name check any ones in particular. So when you combine the SEAI grants and the energy efficiency credits, you're looking at probably between 4 and 4,500 euro of a net saving off that. Now, when you are looking at your heat pump, that's for the heat pump unit. But what you do want to be mindful about is if your heating system is in poor condition, or you need to look at your radiators and your pipe work. And one of the things about installing a heat pump in a home is that it's a really, really good piece of kit, but and to run really efficiently, it needs to make sure that the rest of the heating is up to standard. So for example, we would always carry out, as a contractor, you're required to carry out a heating system design. So what that means is you're taking a room, looking at every single room, calculating the heat loss requirement in every single room, and making sure that the heat emitter, whether it's a radiator or underfloor heating, is suitably sized. And that means that if you've got a radiator that's oversized, it'll mean that, well, the heat pump will use more energy. If it's undersized, well, it won't actually heat your home to the temperature you'd like it. So it's really important that you engage a competent contractor that will carry out your heating system design, and that will ensure that your radiators are suitably sized in every single room, so that when you install your heat pump, that will run really efficiently. So you're talking 10, 12,000 euro, net that down with the SEAI grants and energy efficiency credits, and you're probably talking about the 6,000 to 7,000, but that would not include some of the additional costs in some cases if you need to upgrade other elements.
Yeah, I think that's really good to know. And Ruth, did you want to come in there just on the grants aspect of things? So what is the grant available for heat pumps?
Sure, there's a grant there available for up to €3,500 for homes that were built before 2011, built and occupied before 2011. So it's a little bit higher than what's there for the other grants. And it's important that you make sure you have a grant offer in place before any works begin. And there's also €200 towards getting your technical assessment done to make sure your home is suitable for the heat pump.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing to note, that you need to have the kind of grant in place before you start anything. That's important. Okay, brilliant. So I'll get to, I think there might be a few questions coming through already, which we'll get through in a second. But firstly, I just wanted to look at some of the questions that we received, which we received a lot through people signing up. So hopefully the people who've asked a question are here today to hear the answer. So let's get going. We have quite a few to get through. So one of the questions we had was where to go to get the best advice on putting together a package of energy saving measures for my house. So I might, Noel, I might come to you for that one.
Yeah, so if you're looking in terms of, as I said, when you're upgrading your home's energy efficiency, it's not just generally one measure. You need to look at take a holistic approach to all of your elements of your home. So a good place to start is the SEAI website. So on the SEAI website, you've got a full list of registered contractors. All contractors on the SEAI website will, SEAI ensure that the necessary training, the necessary accreditations, insurances, and everything else are in place. The SEAI also publish a list of one-stop shops. So one-stop shops are a list of companies that will take the whole package of measures. You will find some contractors on the individual list will cover a range of measures, but that's a good place to start, is your SEAI website.
Brilliant, great stuff. And then we have a question here for houses built in different decades. As a place to start, what would be the best value for money? So I might just throw that out to the panel, but is there kind of like a blanket rule of thumb as to where to start regardless of when your house is built, or are there kind of unique things to consider? I know that's probably quite a loaded question, but if anyone wants to tackle that one.
I think when you're looking at buying a house, it's not necessarily when it was built, it's the energy efficiency of the home when you buy it. So for instance, you could buy a house that was built in the 1940s and nothing was ever done with it, or maybe 1980s, whereas you could buy a home that's much older that has been upgraded. So really, like, it's a mandatory requirement now that when you're buying a home, you need to look at the BR assessment. So really, you would be looking at, one of the primary considerations is looking at the BR assessment, the energy efficiency of the home that you're buying, rather than necessarily the age. But there are some things you can watch out for. So if you understand that, for instance, if you've got a cavity wall in your home, cavity wall insulation, if it needs to be upgraded, is much more cost effective than internal insulation or external insulation. So you could expect to upgrade a house built with cavity walls that it wouldn't cost as much as maybe solid walls. So I would say look at the BER that's on the home as part of the sale. And then, that'll include the measures that has been upgraded since at the time. And then maybe look at the type of the home construction. So look at the walls. If it's cavity walls, that'll cost less. If it's raised timber floors, well, generally their tightness on a suspended floor is less than maybe of a solid floor. So, those are the type of aspects. Generally, if you've got flat roofs, they might cost more to upgrade than traditional A roofs. So I wouldn't necessarily look at the age of the property, but I would look at, has it got solid floors? That's a plus. Has it got cavity walls? That's a plus. Has it got, good, decent quality windows? Has it got traditional roofs? If you got a home that has a lot of extensions, they're built with maybe hollow block construction and flat roofs and suspended floors, they're going to cost a lot more than maybe the old, in some cases, the older traditional build. Mm-hmm. So really, look at the BR assessment and then look at the construction of the house, maybe more so than the age of the property.
Okay, brilliant. That's really useful. And in terms of, are there certain homes that can't be retrofitted? So, Eric, I might come to you on that one.
I'd be happy enough to say that I think pretty much every home can be retrofitted if there is methods of doing pretty much any type of house. Is it harder to do some houses? Absolutely. Like Noel alluded to, kind of there, if you have suspended timber floors, flat roofs. Probably the one that springs to mind for me is kind of like traditional buildings. So if you go back maybe 1940, generally anything earlier than 1940, it's going to be solid brick or stone construction. If you can go back even further to stone and kind of cob walls and stuff like that, you're into kind of very specialist sort of work and specialist applications for that type of a home. Generally anything built, and I suppose the bit between 1940 and probably the late 70s, early 80s, you're into solid construction, and then you're after the 70s you're into kind of more modern construction. There's not major kind of issues with houses built from 1970, late 70s, early 80s on. Mm-hmm. It's more kind of the standard insulation and upgrade works that's going to go there.
And Ruth, did you have something to add there?
Just to say that there's currently draft guidelines for the retrofitting of heritage buildings out for the moment for consultation. So they're a really good guide for people to have a look at when they're dealing with more specialist type homes that have different needs, and just to consider conservation architects when you're dealing with those more unusual homes that have different challenges to them. And I know we've certainly struggled on occasion, Eric, the occasion we get a thatch house looking for a warmer homes upgrade, and we're kind of stuck when we get to that stage. So there are certainly very challenging circumstances, but there's no home that something can't be done with if you get the right help and the right expertise.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's brilliant, because we did have a few questions about that, like kind of protected structures. So that's really, really good to know. And Ruth, I might stay with you just for this next question. So somebody asked, can I upgrade in increments? So I have substantial insulation in my attic, a new condensing boiler and radiators that are gas. If I can only do one further job for now, should I do external wall insulation and new windows? The house was built in the 1930s and it's probably mass concrete. So what do you think on that one?
Absolutely. The vast majority of people do things incrementally because that's how we can afford to do it. Yeah. Some people can do what I call the big bang, which is do everything in one go and bring your house right up to a B2 or B2 plus. Incremental is far easier to manage. It just creates certain challenges because every part of your house is connected to another part of your house, but it's definitely something to do. So the approach we would recommend in all cases is usually fabric first. So look at the fabric of your building and upgrade that first, and then look at the systems that you use within that home to keep it warm. So you've already gotten your new boiler and new rads, and you've done insulation to your attic. And again, with that, a certain amount of attic insulation is optimum. If you keep adding insulation, you don't continue to get benefit. So it's worth knowing what the right amount is. It's about 300 mil of a typical insulation at the moment in your attic would be sufficient. In terms of one further job, you're looking at external wall and new windows, and that's part of that fabric of the building, the envelope of the building to upgrade. In terms of if it's one or the other, they work really well together, because when you're insulating external wall, you want to be able to do the full wall and the reveals. And if you're doing it in tandem with the windows, you get a much better finish. If it's one or the other, typically external wall will make up the bigger area of your home. And unless your windows are in very poor condition, the walls will give you a better return. But if you can do walls and windows, that's certainly the next biggest area of your home to consider for doing in the work. So 1930s does usually mean mass concrete. It's rare to find cavities pre-1940. So you are dealing with a mass wall situation. So yeah, it sounds like you've got as I said, by area, it's definitely the next big part of your home.
And one consideration I'd like to add, what Ruth is saying is very true, is if you're insulating, if you have the opportunity to upgrade your windows and walls together with external wall insulation, you have an opportunity to move the location, your position of your windows out to the face of the existing wall, which means you're able to maintain just the same reveals from the outside. You'll maximize the light coming in and you'll minimize the cold bridging. So it's the ideal scenario if you can do your walls and windows together, but certainly you can do it in stages as well.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. That's really helpful. So we have another question here. I have a timber frame home. It's fairly good at keeping the heat in, except the gable end wall, which is freezing in winter. Can I pump this wall with insulation, or does this type of build need to breathe, in inverted commas? So again, I'm just going to throw this out to the panel. Who would like to answer this one? Eric?
Sure, yeah, I've no problem taking that one. In terms of timber frame, the only wall insulation that would be recommended for that is dry line insulation. The timber frame construction does need to have a ventilation cavity kind of in there, which is possibly part of the reason why it's cold in the winter as well. It might be just the aspect of the house, or whichever the way the prevailing wind is kind of there. It's likely that wall is going to get colder. But certainly dry lining would be the right option there.
Okay, brilliant. And Noel, did you want to add anything there?
Yeah, completely agree. Just for timber frame, it's just it's essential that timber breathes. So you could, so you need to maintain that clear cavity, but it's internal insulation. And there may be an opportunity with the timber frame when you are doing internal insulation that you might strip the existing, stripping the existing plasterboard back. You might find the quality of the insulation between the studs might be of a poor quality, that you may be able to actually upgrade the insulation that's already there between the studs and dry line over it as well. But definitely dry line is the way to go.
Okay, brilliant. So another question is, our house has been recently retrofitted with external insulation. On frosty mornings with a heavy dew, all the fixing head positions are visible. It becomes a polka dot house. The fixings did not have an insulation plug inserted outside of the plastic head, which has a steel nail inside. Is this thermal bridging? So what do we think, panel?
This is a difficult one, where you have a situation like this. When fixings are been fixed into external wall insulation, or the external wall insulation, generally all the fixings have, you can have fixings with a steel pin, but at the end of the steel pin, there's a thermally broken head on it with some plastic. In some situations during the application, the fixings are been driven too far in. And what's happening is that there's an uneven layer of base coat been applied over that fixing, which means that on a cold morning, the areas around the fixings heat up quicker, and it's bright. And where you've got an extra thick layer of base coat over the head of the fixing, it takes longer for that to warm up, and it's a duller color. And it sounds like what the homeowner is explaining. In those situations, it's difficult because you have to remove that cold bridging, and that's probably, it's a difficult job when the whole house has been rendered to eliminate.
Okay. So, and did anyone else want to come in there, or shall we keep going? Keep going. Brilliant. Okay, great stuff. So our house was built in the late 1800s. It's a 2-story, 4-bed farmhouse. Sounds lovely. And the only upgrade is double glazing and an oil-fired boiler. Is it realistic to consider a heat pump and solar panels, or would that not be suitable / affordable for a house of this age? So what do we think?
Comes back to the technical assessment again. So doing things in the right order, and again, as Ruth was earlier, saying earlier, it's about taking a fabric first approach, making sure that the whole fabric. So it's very good in terms of that, the windows are done, but you do need to assess your overall heat loss to make sure that it's below that magic number of 2. Now, there can be some exceptions, I think, above 2 where you've got good air tightness, but it would start with your technical assessment to see where your existing HLI factor is. Now, if your HLI factor is out, well, then maybe what you want to look at is looking at your roof insulation first, and maybe your walls. But you won't know until you do that. But definitely, as I think Eric was saying earlier, there's very few homes you could say that's not suitable for a heat pump, but it's just doing it in the right sequence.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Did Ruth or Eric have anything to add there, or will I keep going?
No, happy for you to
yeah, great stuff. So I've just bought a house with only electric heaters and a storage heater. What are my options to upgrade, modernize this heating? There is no gas. And this is actually similar to my house, so I would be interested to know the answer to this. Eric, I might come to you for this one. What are your thoughts?
I suppose the first thing that comes to mind is generally for smaller homes or apartments or something like that, you could look at air-to-air heat pumps. That's certainly an option. It depends on availability of outside space. You might need to talk to the management company and stuff like that as well, with units that would need to go outside. Other than that, I suppose you're into kind of high efficiency or high retention storage heaters. A lot of older apartments would have very old storage heaters that are quite big and inefficient. And sometimes that might be the only option in terms of upgrading, just a high quality, kind of high efficiency electric heater. But ideally, like if there is an option there for an air-to-air heat pump or something like that, that would be the preference.
And I suppose that kind of leads on to the next question, which is kind of around an apartment. So what upgrades would be suitable for, and this is specifically an 18-year-old apartment. So yeah, to the panel again, what do you guys think on that one?
Apartments are a little more difficult, obviously, because you're part of a larger building. So, measures like external wall insulation and roof insulation generally need to be done as part of an overall project amongst all the residents and everything. But again, I suppose what you can control fully yourself is the heat. And I think what Eric had spoke about in terms of recommendation there is really, is on the money. Windows are the other one that generally can be upgraded as part of your individual apartment, and you can also look in terms of wall insulation. If there's a cavity wall, which wouldn't be very too popular, but you could look at dry lining. So what's within your own bounds would be your own dry lining, internal wall insulation, windows and doors, your heating, and then looking at where you position yourself. So obviously, if you're some apartments have an A roof and you're the top apartment, well, then you may own the attic and you could do the roof. If you're further down, you mightn't be as lucky. You're dependent on the person above you. But if there's somebody above you, that's not considered a heat loss space, because the apartment above is heated, you're heated, so you have very little heat loss. So in some cases, apartments that are kind of inbuilt, where they're not at the top, not at the bottom, not in at the ends, they perform quite well because the apartments around them are heated. So there's the heat loss is limited to the external walls, and you're looking again, I suppose, your windows, your walls, and your heating system.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Great stuff. Thanks, Noel. So one very popular kind of upgrade that people were asking about when they were signing up were solar panels. So I know we previously mentioned that we could talk about solar panels for days. So I'm keeping this quite specific to the questions that were asked, but I think it'd probably be good to touch on firstly the different types, maybe considerations for people around where they should go and what they should choose, and when people should consider installing, and then I'll go into the more specifics that people have asked. So Eric, I might come to you first. Could you talk us through the different types of solar panels and the considerations around kind of installing them?
Sure. There's two main types. So the first is solar thermal, and that heats hot water. So it's, I suppose, really the key driver to that one is your hot water demand in a home. So if you have a house with lots of occupants, lots of people taking showers and baths, you need a lot of hot water, and that's kind of the best application of solar thermal or solar water heating. If you have an electric shower and a dishwasher, for instance, you probably don't use a lot of hot water, so it probably might make a lot of sense to install it. The other type is solar PV, or your solar electricity, and that's become quite popular kind of now in terms of applications. Essentially, we all use electricity kind of all the time, so it makes a lot of sense to install it. In terms of an upgrade, it's probably more something that you'd look at towards the end of your upgrade kind of journey, or kind of as you are upgrading your home. It's kind of seen as the icing on the cake, or the cherry on top, kind of in terms of where you're kind of going with upgrades. But I suppose that's the two types. If Ruth or Noel want to jump in there, kind of on anything else.
Yeah, that's typically the two types. In terms of other factors that might and it's an obvious one when you say it, but roof space. So sometimes somebody might say, okay, I've got a really good requirement, whether it's for hot water or for electricity, and I want to install solar panels, but the orientation of the house isn't in the right way. Or you might have a lot, the south facing aspect, you might have lots of V-lux, or you might, in some other cases, it might affect the cost where the access is difficult, because you might have a big glass conservatory on your south facing side, which you need to overcome to get up to your roof space. So looking at the availability of roof space, the orientation of roof space is also another consideration. If you're looking between solar thermal and solar PV, generally solar PV is more universal in the sense that it generates electricity, but that electricity can also be used to heat your immersion and your hot water, whereas solar thermal can only generally is used to heat your hot water. From an installation point of view, solar PV is generally more straightforward, because if you imagine you have to route wires and cables directly, from your roof space down to your board. In the case of solar thermal, it also requires upgrading your hot water cylinder and getting pipes down. So generally solar PV is very, less intrusive, probably less expensive in terms of in a lot of cases. And really it's become much more popular in recent years.
Yeah, brilliant. And just while we're talking to you, Noel, how do I estimate the size of the PV panels that I need? That's another question that we've had in. And then a part of that was, what would be a reasonable payback time on a residential property? If you could kind of talk to that.
Yeah, so in terms of panels, the technology in the panels are improving all the time. So I remember, even just if it's only go back maybe 2 years, the average panel was maybe 250 watts per panel to 60 watts. Now most manufacturers are retailing panels that are 330, 340 and 350. So the output per panel is increasing all the time. But generally the higher performing panels do cost more because they perform better. So the higher performing panels are really, really good, where you're looking at maximizing the amount of output you can get from your roof space, or if your roof space is restricted. Again, I think from I think from a domestic, I think SEAI have done some research from from a domestic application. Generally kind of 1.5 to 2 kilowatts is the most popular size of system that's installed. When you go beyond, I think about 3.5 kilowatts, you should be looking at maybe some battery storage. But again, battery storage costs some more money to store. So the best payback you're going to get is where your panels are tapping in power into your electricity system that's just been used, dissipated straight away. You don't have to incur the cost of storage or the cost of installation of storage. And generally, I think it can range, but I might stand to Eric, you might be able to correct me on this, but there was a calculator in terms of the payback on the SEAI website where you could put in the kilowatt, the rate you're paying and the size, and it would actually give you a pretty accurate payback period. But I think I'm thinking of 2 figures from recollection. One, I think it's about 7 years. Would that be right? Or would you Eric, I'll get some backup from Eric and Ruth.
I think Ruth as well. Kind of, you're familiar enough with that calculator, but I'd say 7 years is, once you're not getting into battery storage or anything extra, you're kind of 7 years sounds about right.
Yeah, I did the calculator this morning for my own house, so it is on our website. It's just a solar electricity calculator, and if I get a very good price with my grant, it looks like an 8-year payback. And I have a self-facing roof, so it's there for you to put in. There's some standard assumptions in there, and it just gives you a sense of what's possible. What I'd say is, if people can just maybe look at how they use electricity in their home and see what's the optimum for them. So if you have a smart meter installed, get access to the file to see what your electricity use is like. If you don't have one, you can buy an electricity meter that you can just put on your meter board and just watch how much electricity you're using, and that will help you identify what your peak is. Up until last year, I would have always said when the sun shines, people aren't at home. My first instinct is certainly not to hoover and run the tumble dryer and the washing machine. I'm out. But the last 1.5 years have proven that even when the sun shines, sometimes we're at home too. So it's understanding that profile of your own electricity use so that you can optimize the system for you and consider how you want to live in the future as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Sorry, Eric, did you want to say something there?
No, I think that's great advice. And in terms of, it's great to hear a contractor kind of like Noel giving such sage advice. I suppose one of the things you do see is, systems being installed that just aren't suitable for, in some cases you might see a system that's really oversized, lots of battery storage. It's just not the right solution for a home, so in terms of, it's about self-consumption, it's about using the energy, like when it's, you'll use it as it comes in, not as unstoring unnecessarily. And, once you get into massive cost with solar, it just extends the payback period so much, so small systems are generally kind of all we need, and they'll pay back quicker.
Brilliant. Time is absolutely flying. We have 20 minutes left before we're kind of coming to the end. So I'm going to start going a little bit quicker here. So we've got 2 questions on combi boilers, which I feel like will be able to be answered in a yes/no fashion. So do combi boilers work with a solar PV in a home?
Yes.
Yes.
Fantastic. Somebody's asked, I'm considering adding a combi gas boiler as a backup to my heat pump. What do the experts think? Is this a good idea?
So sometimes I think it can be an overkill. So for example, if you get your proper heating system design done, a technical assessment done, you're making sure your heat losses are right, your room by room heat losses and sizes are right. It shouldn't be needed. And as he said, it's a backup if something fails. So I think some of the events where you might have a power cut, as a secondary, situation, most people might have an open fire, they might have something else. But personally, my own house, I wouldn't feel it necessary, but some people might feel that they just want to go up and over, what normally is the case.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
I think in terms of backup, it's for really, really cold days. We just don't get a lot of them. So I think I'm probably a no on that one.
Okay, no problem. And then just to kind of round off solar panels, Ruth, could you give us an idea of the grants available for solar panels?
Sure. So for the solar thermal that generates the hot water, that's €1,200, up to €1,200, depending on the sizes to be put in. And for solar PV, up to €3,000 again, depending on the size and the battery storage option you choose, all on our website under Home Energy Grants.
Fantastic. Okay, great stuff. So the next kind of topic that we got asked questions under was windows. So we have a few questions to go through here. So this person is looking for advice on sealing windows and glass doors that were fitted 15 years ago, but unfortunately the installer has gone out of business. Do we have any kind of advice for this person?
Yeah, so if you're looking at windows, say 15 years ago, there's a couple of different things where windows can be leaking. So overall, so I suppose 15 years ago, the thermal conductivity of the windows and the glass wouldn't be obviously as good as they are now. Probably 15 years ago, you might talk about a maybe U value, maybe 2.8, whereby new windows now are going in about 1.2. So the new windows would be, you know, half the heat loss to the existing windows. Where you've got drafts, you want to see where sometimes you can have drafts around the windows where the actual windows themselves are pretty good, or else you've got windows in the, or you've drafts in the openings. If you have drafts in the openings, it's relatively straightforward where you can get, you know, you can get draft proof kits and tapes and sealants in, you know, in any of the, you know, any of the hardware chains or the woodies, that you can actually just, you know, seal the drafts around your windows. Relatively low cost, takes a little bit of time and detail, but there's lots of products there, very, very easy to do. Where you've got problems around the window frames themselves, sometimes windows were fitted where there wasn't a sealant or a foam put around the windows and you just get that draft underneath your window boards. That's a little bit more difficult. And in those cases, you might need to just break the internal reveal to get a sealant in there, or you might just seal it with a silicone sealant right around to begin with and see how that works before you go doing more intrusive work. So in a lot of cases, there's a lot you can do for very little money in terms of sealing the drafts around your windows.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Thanks, Noel. So a question here, do I need to replace windows if I add external insulation? So I know we've kind of spoken on that, but I mean, we're kind of saying it's not absolutely necessary, but it would be great to do.
Yeah, it would. Your heat loss, going back to, if your plan is to fit a heat pump, which is going to be in a lot of people's plans in years to come, it's really, really good to understand what your heat loss factor is in your home, and upgrade your windows might be something that you will need to do in the future. So you mightn't see it as an absolute requirement now, but if you know where you're going to go in a couple of years' time fitting a heat pump, you might decide, well, do you know what, I'm going to need to replace them anyway, and if I can, as I said earlier, you know, great to do them together, but you can do them separately, and you can situations where, you know, the external wall insulation is done and the internal the windows, the existing windows have been changed after that. That can be done as well, but preference would be together, but you can do it separately.
Great, that's great to know. So last question on windows here. It's actually in relation to a protected structure. So we were mentioning that earlier. So I'm in a Victorian house, which is a protected structure. We want to upgrade the windows to double glazed. Are there grants for that, Ruth?
So we don't have grants, and this answers a few of the questions. We don't have grants specifically for windows as individual grants. Where somebody is part of a one-stop shop or community grant upgrade, it is possible to be considered as part of that project if it meets the requirements of the grant and there is one active, and typically the coverage there is 35%. Where you have a Victorian house that is a protected structure, we would recommend that you liaise with your local heritage officer and local authority to ensure that whichever measures you're proposing are in line with what is permitted there.
Okay, yeah, that's great advice. Okay, so the last kind of section to cover is the grants available and just a little chat around finance, because that was kind of popular as well, the questions that we got through. So I wonder, Ruth, if we could start with you. I know we were talking there about kind of solar grants for solar panels and also heat pumps, but could you give us kind of a whistle-stop tour of the grants available for people, where they can go to find that information, and just give us a little bit of a top line insight there?
Sure. So we've three core delivery strands for upgrades to homes in Ireland. So the first is the Warmer Home Scheme, and this is typically for people who receive certain benefits, and the measures are provided free of charge. So you can see the information on our website under Warmer Home Scheme and check your eligibility under that. Now there is a waiting list, but it is all delivered free of charge. Then there's the individual grant measures, which is what most people are familiar with under the Home Energy Grant Programme, and that's been running since 2009. So the measures there are measure by measure. You can apply for multiple measures. For all homes built before 2006 are eligible for all measures. And then for the likes of heat pump, solar thermal and solar PV, your home has to be built before 2011. Attic insulation is €400. Wall insulation ranges from €400 for cavity wall all the way up to €6,000 for a detached external wall insulation job. Heating controls is there for €700. Heat pump is up to €3,500 depending on the technology you choose. Solar thermal 1,200, and as mentioned, solar PV is up to 3,000. So the chat function there has given you a link to it. And then finally, the new space that we're in now is the one-stop shop model, whereby people can work with the contractor who groups homes together and makes a group application and looks after the grant and the financing and bringing together all the different types of contractors that you might need. So it's certainly an awful lot less stressful on the homeowner. They don't have to project manage their own project. And there, the grants are typically 35% of any eligible technology upgrade that your home may need. So it may suit those atypical homes that don't do as well under the grants as everybody else would.
Yeah, I think a one-stop shop is definitely the way to go. So that's absolutely fantastic that that's available. Then we have kind of more specific questions that we're getting into in relation to grants and finance. So in terms of one question here, what can I avail of in terms of grants to upgrade the energy rating of an extension? I need a new boiler / insulation, that kind of thing. So what is available, Ruth, for people looking to upgrade?
So I'm assuming they're building a new extension, in which case they wouldn't be eligible for any measures because that part of the building wouldn't have been built on time. So if it's part of the building that was built before 2006 or 2011, they would be eligible. But new build, even if it's an extension to an existing home, doesn't qualify. They're required to bring the thermal performance of that bit up to the same standard.
Okay, no problem. Then in terms of what would be the timeline between application for the SEAI grants and actual delivery of the retrofit? Now, I know that every case is so different, but is there some kind of indication that you could give us there?
Sure. In the one individual grants, the typical time people do the work is around month 4 from the time they apply. Okay. So once you know what you want to do, you're sure of the path you're going to take, and you have a contractor in mind and a price, and that contractor is on our registered list of installers, you can make that application and you're approved within 2 minutes. So literally the contractor can be knocking on the door and you can be making your grant application, have your letter of offer, and then the work can start. If you've already applied and don't feel you're going to proceed, the best thing you do is go and cancel and then just reapply when you know exactly what you're going to do. You can change contractors to a different contract that's also registered, should that have come about because your own contractor isn't available. I think all of us know it's difficult to get all the work that you need done in your home. There's an awful lot of pent-up demand there since the lockdown. So it's really who you have, how quickly you can do it. The grants we try and turn around as quickly as we can when the payment requests come in as well. So that usually turns around in a couple of weeks. It's really about lining up the right contractor at the right time for your home.
Mm-hmm. Okay, brilliant. And then if the home you plan to retrofit is not your primary residence, can you still avail of grants?
Yeah, no problem there at all. As many homes as you own, you can get a grant for.
Amazing. And can I get a grant for insulating upstairs if downstairs is already done?
Sure. So the requirement under the grant is that at the end of the grant process, 100% of the measure that you're applying for is complete standard. So you're going to have to ensure that it's done to the same standard and that it achieves the same performance as is required by the grant. Right. But if you've done part, there's no problem getting the grant for the rest. You'll never get more than you've paid for the measure in the eligible grant window. So if it didn't cost you as much as the grant is, it'll be deducted, but you'd end up with 100% grant for whatever you incurred then.
Okay, that's great. So a couple more questions here. I bought an old abandoned property and have started refurb works. It was financed via my pension. Does a pension fund have access to the same or other financial support as a private individual?
The person who owns the building, be that a landlord or a private individual, has access to the grants. So a management company can apply if they own properties to apply for the grant as well, as long as they can prove ownership of that building. So if the pension fund is the owner, they can apply for the grant. I don't know if that's quite what they're asking, but that's the closest answer I can find.
Yeah, no, that's great. Then somebody has asked very specifically, is there a full grant for a full retrofit for a house in North Wicklow built in 1970?
the Wicklow and 1970 element don't have any bearing whether it's full grant. The full grant, I'm suspecting, is the likes of warmer homes. So it's about finding out do they meet the requirement of warmer homes. If they're looking for a full retrofit, only measures available in the warmer home scheme that the home is suited for would be available. So it's about exploring the warmer homes one. After that, they're either doing the one-stop shop at 35% or individual measures, which may work out more profitable. So you could be a very small detached bungalow and €6,000 is an awful lot for external wall insulation. Or you could be a very, very large 6-bedroom detached 3-story, and you're also getting €6,000.
Okay.
So it really depends on your own home. We try, the grants are pitched at a third of the cost of a typical measure.
Yeah, that's a really good rule of thumb to keep in mind. And then the last one here, I suppose we could kind of throw this out to the panel. Do you think there should be a government-based interest-free loan scheme for the installation of all energy home improvement products?
Yes, is this a yes, no answer?
Certainly financing is a big part. Financing is a big part.
Are we still in that phase? Yeah, yes.
Yeah. You can say a bit more than just yes, no, if you like.
Yeah. Look, it's down to policy, but we know in terms of selling anything, whether you're going in buying a car, whether you're buying a car, whether you're buying a TV, it's about how you sell it. And like, for instance, like energy efficiency is really, really good for lots of things in terms of for the environment, but principally people do it for themselves, for their comfort, for energy saving. So if there is any way, in terms of that you can lower the barrier to add further incentives, but obviously it's, I'm not a financier. I don't, the powers that be, it would be nice to see if they could leverage European funding, for retrofitting to ensure that the cost of that funding is minimised. But that's my personal opinion.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So we literally have, I'm going to say 7 minutes. And so we've kind of gone through a huge amount of what we receive when people signed up. I see that there's quite a few coming through on our Q&A. So what I'm going to do is just take a few of these and we can just have a chat through, and then we're going to have to start wrapping things up. So Sheila has asked, is it worth installing a heat pump in a standard semi-detached house with standard radiators? Will it be effective at heating the house if there is no underfloor heating?
Short answer is yes. It will. Heat pump will work with standard radiators, but you want to make sure that the radiators are convecting radiators and the radiators are suitably sized for the room. So in most cases, she probably has oil or gas, whereby they run at a higher temperature, but in a lot of cases, those radiators were oversized. So it comes down to the contractor. If the contractor does a heating system design, they'll determine whether those radiators are suitable. But if they're modern steel radiators, they will work fine. They work fine with the heat pump. You don't necessarily need underfloor heating all the time. If it was a new build, underfloor heating is lovely. It's great. But for retrofitting, they're very commonly fitted with standard radiators once they're convecting and the existing pipework is suitable, and you may need to power flush it out to make sure that it's running at optimum level.
Fab. Okay, and then we have JJ here has asked, can anything be done for a house built in 1950?
Absolutely, yeah. Like we mentioned kind of earlier, I suppose pre-80s, kind of slightly different construction, but certainly there's no, I suppose once we go back kind of further pre-1940, that's where you want to start being, taking in kind of maybe more considerations into, the wall type, what solutions and what products you're going to use. 1950, it should be a standard enough job.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. And then I know we mentioned kind of timber frame homes before. Somebody's just asked, can I pump insulation into the cavity?
No, it's a breathable cavity. Yeah. Internal dry lining insulation only.
Boom, I love the efficiency of these answers. Okay, then Michael Hogan here has asked, I have a B3 rated house. It's 30 plus years old, cavity block solar panels. What can I do to replace my oil central heating to be more efficient?
Heat pump.
Heat pump, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also if he's a B3 already and he's got, he's very efficient, the good heating controls for a couple more years and running your oil boiler as efficiently as you can. If you're only using it very intermittently, your payback on a heat pump is going to be an awful lot longer than it is for somebody else, but it's certainly something to plan for. So you might have a 5 to 8 year time frame to consider switching over to a heat pump.
Yeah. It's a good point, because it's a diminishing returns. The more energy efficient you make your home, the less energy you use and the less savings you'll make. So yeah, I think that's good advice by you.
Okay, fantastic. And then again, another question here about timber framed house retrofits. So just wondering what the best insulation is for that. They have a garage conversion and wonder, should they remove the plasterboard and find suitable insulation that won't cause a moisture retention?
Yeah. Okay. So with timber frame, it's we spoke earlier about it needs to be ventilated. So you can look at two options where you can use a PIR insulation between the timber frame. More older timber frames, typically where it was a quilt insulation that was fitted between the insulation stud, and then you could add a dry liner material. But you can choose to go with a higher performing insulation between the stud. If you have any concern about reassurance that you're using the right insulation, you can do or get a competent BR assessor or contractor to do a thermal or condensation risk analysis on the timber, on what you're proposing, to make sure that it'll breathe as it should. But it's not necessarily, is there any one insulation material better than another? It's down to the thermal conductivity of the insulation you're using. So yes, that's an option, but it comes down to what's the most cost-effective way of reducing your heat loss, and that may just come down to internal dry lining, or if he's in a position to do some work himself, maybe take off the slab, remove the existing insulation and fit a higher performing insulation like a PIR.
Okay, great stuff. Where do you start when it comes to renovating a 1980s bungalow that is BE or D1 rated? Is it as simple as getting a survey from contractors done? So BE or? I would actually say, when you're talking to contractors will generally give advice on what they're offering, but you always start with the fabric measures, start with the cheaper measures that give you most bang for your buck. So look at your roof insulation, wall, windows, doors, floors. So if it's a D2, it's likely that they may have had some attic insulation maybe done, or some heating controls or a boiler. But again, coming back to that technical assessment, if it's a home they've bought and they're saying, look, we're going to stay in this for a prolonged period of time, we want to get up to that, that A rating, get that technical assessment, and then you'll get a full list and do the fabric measures first in the most cost-effective manner. Okay, great stuff. So Cathal has just said here, so I've heard that heat pumps release harmful gas like fluoride or something. Are we replacing bad with just as bad, a bit like diesel for petrol? I haven't heard of that personally, but do you guys know anything about that?
Doesn't release unless it's malfunctioning. So yeah. It uses it as a permanent cycle. It may occasionally need to be recharged, but it's not releasing the refrigerated gas. Yeah,
gotcha. Makes sense. I'm finding it very satisfying saying answering live done. I'm like, it's like crossing something off with the highlighter. Okay. Philip has asked, is there a chart showing the cost of heating my house with a heat pump relating to the BER and type of house?
There isn't that I'm aware of, but it's certainly one I'll take back as a recommendation to the grants team, because I know, like the solar thermal, the heat pump would be a really good one for people to work out what their payback and cost would be. So yeah, no, I'll take it back as a suggestion. Okay. Hi Philip, I think you're the same Philip I know.
Thanks Philip. So we have, if you have some neighbours that are interested in getting a heat pump together, is it installed in one garden, or would one have to be installed at each house?
Yeah, for each home, you recommend everyone is responsible for their own. So unless you're doing like a district heating system, which I'm sure it's not, every house would have a separate external module. So generally, each house will have, now you might have some, you might be able to achieve some efficiencies in terms of cost if you're dealing with one contractor that's pricing two jobs that's just right next to each other. Generally, you could, there's some repetition in terms of work, and you might get an extra bit of value, but you will need a separate outdoor unit if you want to be in control of your utility cost.
Okay, great stuff. Do heat pumps have to have an underfloor system?
No. Just appropriate radiators.
Great. Okay. We've covered that. We've asked that. I'm like, Can you discuss ventilation requirements after upgrading windows and insulation and associated costs? I think ventilation is a good one, actually, isn't it?
It's a rabbit hole.
Okay, right. Don't go down the rabbit hole, Noel.
No, but I'll just stick my head down and have a look around. So just in terms of I suppose the importance is that when you insulate a home, you increase the air tightness. It's hugely important that you've good ventilation in a home. Because like when you breathe, when you cook, when you wash, when you shower, you create a lot of steam, a lot of moisture. You don't want that moisture condensing in your home that can cause damp, mold, and all those things that you don't want. So generally you want a background vent in all your habitable rooms, and you want, for health and safety, wherever you have a fuel burning stove, or you want a permanent vent. There are different levels of ventilation. That's the entry level, where you're just putting in, holes in the walls, so you can get more sophisticated demand control ventilation that will automatically pull out the damp out of those wet rooms, kitchens, utilities and bathrooms. Or you can go all in and put in a heat recovery ventilation system, but really that's not feasible unless you're doing a complete gut of your house. So generally minimum level vents, background vents, permanent vents, and the background vents could be trickle vents in your windows if you're getting your windows changed, up to demand control ventilation, and then pushing out. But the more sophisticated ventilation systems are only required where your air tightness is reducing all the time. So it's horses for courses.
You know, that was good. No, you really didn't go down the rabbit hole there. Okay, so we have actually run out of time. I know we have about 20 other questions there that we didn't get to, so apologies to attendees. We have taken note of all of these questions, and I'm delighted to say our panelists have very kindly agreed to answer these questions after and offline, and we will make sure to get the answers to you in due course. So please keep an eye on our website, codema.ie, and we'll also be uploading this recording to YouTube. Before we finish up, I just want to ask each of you as our panelists, if you could leave our attendees with one piece of advice today in relation to, I was like, it has to be specific in relation to home energy upgrades, not just life advice. What would it be? Eric, I'll come to you first.
I suppose the big thing for me is when I speak to people about home energy upgrades is they always, I suppose they don't know what they have to do. And every house is very much unique. We deal with upgrades on houses that are, built, already, generally before 2006, sometimes 2011. And your average homeowner won't know where to start. So, reach out to contractors, BER assessors, technical assessors, even domestic dwelling surveyors, kind of, get somebody in to have a look, see what's there already, and see what you need to get done. Once you know where you can start, you can start engaging with different contractors and plan your retrofit. And like I said, our target is this B2, the elusive B2 and heat pump. So it's to know the steps to get there, I think is really important.
Brilliant, great stuff. And Ruth, what would be your one piece of advice?
You're not in it alone. So we know from the level of interest this morning and the level of questions that we see and the level of activity in the market, hundreds of people are doing this every day and trying to come to decisions. So reach out, ask, talk to friends, neighbours, look to see if there's a community in your area that is a sustainable energy community, and get advice that way. Find ways of working together to find better solutions. So know what you're using, know why you're using it, and then start looking at your options and plan. It's not a panic. It's a journey for most people. So best of luck, and we wish you well on it. And hopefully our paths cross again at a future webinar and we can do more for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ruth. And Noel, what are your kind of closing remarks?
Yeah, I pick up on just where Ruth left off in terms of plan. Just don't look more medium long term. So, for example, if you're upgrading your windows now, you might look at you're looking at what requirements would I need maybe in even 6 years' time for a heat pump. So, some people don't look far enough. They say, well, look, that's going to cost a lot of money. I don't have the means now. But I would say don't inhibit your plan based on costs right now. Plan as if you have all the money in the world and get the best plan, and then figure out how you're going to fund it in steps and increments, because you find that you can do the smaller items first and here and now, and you've got something to work with, and you'll get to the point that you're set out as your goal.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Okay, great stuff. So I think we've kind of reached the end of our chat today. So a huge thank you to our panelists, Ruth, Eric, and Noel. This was an incredibly informative session that I have no doubt our participants found extremely useful. So thank you so much for your time, especially on a Saturday morning. And thank you to all of you who registered and participated. We really appreciate it. I know there are still lots of questions, but we promise to get back to you on those. Just a couple of things before I finish up. We actually launched a survey this week to get the public's view on how we can move Dublin away from fossil fuels and make our capital a clean and healthy county to live, work and visit. And the responses are going to help us in how we can kind of better engage the public around the energy we use at home. And it's going to inform actions of a Zero Together roadmap, which we're creating, which will determine how we can reduce Dublin's reliance on fossil fuels towards 2030 and beyond. So I'm just going to pop that in the chat there. So I'd really appreciate if you could fill that out, because we want to get as many perspectives and responses as possible. So you're probably all aware that we are nearing the end of Dublin's first ever Climate Action Week. I, for one, have been absolutely blown away by the quality and choice of events over the last week. So just to let you know of one of the final events that we're supporting, and it's taking place tomorrow. I think there are a couple of spaces left. So Ruth mentioned the Sustainable Energy Communities Programme. So this is Bellarmine SEC. We'll be doing a walking tour. It's of Fernhill Park. So that's taking place tomorrow at 2 p.m. So we can put the Eventbrite link in for that if anyone is interested in going along. Hopefully the weather will stay on our side. And then, details on this event and the remaining events from our fellow organising partners, including how to register, are available on dublinclimateactionweek.ie. So thank you all again so much for joining us. Thank you to our panelists, and I hope to see you all at an event in the future. Take care.